I'm very blessed to be joined by a brilliant Scotsman, Daryl Watson. Daryl, you've just returned very recently from being mission leaders with your wife at the Netherlands Belgium mission. Is that the what it's called?
Belgium, Netherlands mission.
Oh
Yeah,
dear, really? Belgium Netherlands mission, and I just thought it would be really interesting to get some insights about missionary work today and insights into what it's like to be a mission leader. And well, why don't we start with the always fun story of how you actually got called to be a mission leader?
Well, it was a little unexpected. We simply get a call from Salt Lake. It was the secretary to the Quorum of the 12. We had an initial call with Elder Renland, and they're very, very pleasant. They have a lovely conversation with you. They explored with my wife and I a whole host of things, our health, our finances, our family situation, all of that kind of good stuff. And then at the end, they say, well, if you don't hear anything from us within a few weeks or months, then we'll just maybe keep your name on record. So that was it. The very next day, we get a phone call from the office of the First Presidency. President Oakes would like to speak with the two of you, and
Oh,
so we set up a date. It was just after the October 2020 General Conference. I think it was about the week after. We had a lovely call with President Oakes, just an absolute gentleman for about an hour on Zoom, and he asked similar questions, and then beautiful little conversation. He said that your names had been placed before the presidency and the Quorum of the 12, and they felt good about extending a call to serve as mission leaders. I can recall that he is gluten free, like my wife, and it was interesting that they spent comparing gluten free meals for 5 or 10 minutes. From one side of the pond to the other, we're talking about gluten free, but lovely, beautiful experience. We accept it, and then he called us, and then you wait for about 2.5 months to the middle of December to receive your actual assignment. Both of us kind of had a sneaky little feeling that it might be Belgium, Netherlands. We'd already checked to see if it was becoming free and available, and it was. And with my wife and the Dutch connection, yeah, it was a lovely surprise, nevertheless, to receive the assignment in the middle of December of 2020, still in COVID times.
oh yeah. Could you share with us and illustrate the kind of transition period of how you go from that point to actually being a mission president and the kind of volume of training that you receive, or you I imagine moving anyway for a temporary period for 2 years. I mean, you were you working? Did you have to give that up? I'm just interested in all of this, how you moved to that.
Okay, so a number of things. Both of us had callings in the church. We were quite busy, so we were released from those callings in January of 2021. I have my own coaching, leadership development, management consultancy, so I continued to work there until we went on our mission. And actually, throughout the mission, I did a little bit of work as well, just to stay close to some of my key clients. But certainly, because it was COVID times, everything was online. And we had 6 months of training prior to your departure into the field. Full on, pretty much. Lots of podcasts to listen to, lots of online training with apostles, general authorities, other general authorities, and frequently those were attending, like at least one or two a week for several months. We
Oh yeah.
had training with the area presidency in which we were going to, which at that time was the Europe area presidency. It's changed now, of course, with Europe Central and Europe North. So you had training with them. You got to know there was a sort of group of mission leaders who had been called. So there was about 10 couples that we became very familiar with who were assigned to the Europe area. So we did things together with them. A lot of emphasis on preach my gospel. So lots of training and encouragement to read Preach My Gospel. And also for me, I had to really focus on my Dutch. So I had some MTC training on Dutch once a week to get my proficiency up a little. It was full on for those 6 months. And then, of course, during COVID times as well, there was a lot of issues about would we actually get to go because it was such a difficult
Right.
time and no one was traveling. The mission leaders in the mission at that time were Belgian mission leaders who had returned to their own home in Belgium and were running the mission from Belgium. So we had several Zoom calls with them to become aware of the size of the mission, what was going on. So, yeah, very busy, Ben. Lots going on.
It's interesting because for some reason, and it seems silly in hindsight, I thought that the culmination of the training that you received was purely that kind of 2 day seminar that they give all the talks to, and it makes complete sense that there is more. But I didn't actually know about that and how it works. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. And another kind of, maybe we'll debunk some myths today. But another thing that I was kind of told by my mission president was that when he came into the mission, in my regard, that would be the Singapore mission, he essentially arrived to the mission field, had an hour with the outgoing mission president, and then it was okay. We're here. What was the day of you becoming the mission president and mission leaders of the mission like?
Very similar to what you just described. It has changed
Right.
now, of course, so I'll come to that at the end. But we arrived in country 10 days before we would take over the mission because of COVID. And we never
Right.
had that trip to Salt Lake for the 3 day mission leader seminar. It was all online. So we never got out there. And actually getting set apart as a mission leader was quite a story in itself because we had to travel after the day we got out of lockdown for our COVID isolation. We had to drive to Germany, meet Elder Saban on his very last day, and he set us apart as mission leaders. And then we had to drive back to actually attend the mission leader seminar. So it was all kind of touch and go. The first day with President Sister Balsa, it was very special. Really, we came to the mission home for the first time, and we were given a little tour of the the mission home. Bearing in mind, we were all just out of kind of lockdown and COVID, so we were all kind of just distancing ourselves, and it was a little bit unusual. So we did that. We had President Balsa and I had a real special moment in the mission office, in the mission home, where we had a little office, where we both kind of felt the transition of those keys from him to me. And that was a real special moment for the two of us as we both realised that that was the passing of that, the priesthood mantle. And that was lovely. It was quite a spiritual experience for the two of us. We got some lovely pictures with the assistants at the time, and we then moved from the mission home to the mission office, which was about half an hour away in Gouda. There we met the office staff for the first time. There was only one other, there was a couple of couples, one was going home shortly, and we had a lovely meal. We had basically about 2 hours, really. This is where we're at. Here's the keys. Here's your SIM card for your phone. And then they said farewell. Yeah, it literally was from the time in the morning to the afternoon. It was about 3 or 4 hours, and then they left. Yeah, but very special, a special moment just to be with them on that day. And we're still in touch with Joe and Linda Balsa. We saw them several times during the mission, and it was great fun to see them and just compare notes. And we inherited 29 9 of their missionaries. That's what was left in the mission when we arrived because of COVID.
Wow. And reflecting on the whole experience now, was being a mission leader what you expected and anticipated it would be?
Not exactly. I think there were some things I was expecting it to be that it wasn't. Obviously, I mean, you go through 6 months of training, and it's a spiritual high. You're really excited to get into the mission field. Wow, it's going to be, preach my gospel and out there and teaching and sharing, and then in reality, what happened was we arrived and the mission was in decline. There was, in terms of missionaries, no missionaries were arriving. So we had lots of practical things to do immediately. The apartments hadn't been really attended to, so my wife and I cleaned 40 odd apartments, the two of us, the first few months we were in field. That wasn't my expectation at all. It was more to do with a lot more spiritual things than actually teaching with the missionaries. I can actually count on my 3 years as mission leaders with my wife. I actually taught on 3 occasions.
Oh wow.
Just 3 occasions. It was just that, and I expected to be teaching every day or going
Yeah.
out with missionaries every day and doing something. That's definitely not the case, and certainly not in our mission. I don't know what it's been in others, but for us, it is um, a relentlessness of actually dealing with missionary things and the missionary cycle, and I can talk you through that. But there's a cycle of things that transpire that you're constantly to be mindful of as missionaries. So the idea of me teaching all the time and going out with missionaries was certainly fronting in my mind, but it never turned out that way.
Right. Well, what was your kind of daily routine like? Well, I imagine it's different every day, but
Daily
on a
routines.
standard
Yeah.
day.
So a typical, well, it's easier to describe to you how a mission works. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So we were called, my wife and I, to serve for 3 years. Well, 3 years in missionary life is 27 transfers of 6 weeks. And everything in the mission revolves around the 6 week transfer, or as I come to know it, the 42 days. 42 days. And so from day one to day 42, you have a cycle, and you go through that cycle 27 times. And that cycle is filled with certain things. For instance, day one is arrivals day. So you get your new missionaries coming in, and sometimes you'd have one or two, and I think the biggest group we had was 24 or 25 that came in. So then you've got to bring them into the mission. You've got to pick them up at the airport, bring them in, do a tiny little bit of paperwork with them. They meet their companion, then they go out to their area. Then the very next day, you've got the departures. So you've got to deal with all the departing missionaries, final interviews, have final meals, final testimony meeting, final this, final that. Then on the next day, you take them to the airport. And those 3 days are exhausting because you don't stop you're up earlier than normal. I'm always up early, but the first 3 days of any transfer are frankly quite exhausting. And
I
then you'd
assume it's
have,
quite an emotional experience too,
oh,
because you're
yeah,
saying goodbye to people who, I mean, I assume mean so much to you now.
those were some of the most difficult experiences I had. My wife was a little tougher than me, but I was an emotional wreck most transfer departures. And oftentimes when I came home that day, I'd have to go to my bed for an hour just for a nap to catch up. We often had missionaries' parents coming to pick up their departing missionary as well. So that would take an hour or two in the afternoon of departures day. And I think once or twice we had 3 or 4 collect in one day, and that was quite heavy. So
Wow. Yeah.
there's a heaviness on you from the start. Then you go through your cycle of the transfer, Ben, and And effectively, so you'd have the following day, you'd have the Mission Leadership Council. And that these things just don't happen. You've got to take some thought and preparation. That lasted mostly 6 hours. You'd have your zone leaders, your assistants, your sister trainer leaders, your social media leaders, the mission councillors, mission presidency were there, the service mission leaders were. So there was a whole bunch of people met together to counsel about the focus for the next month ahead. Following that, you would then go into the next week. You'd start with orientation meeting. So all the missionaries would come back and they'd spend a whole day with you going through orientation, going to the temple. Um, and then following that, you'd have your social media leadership council with all the social media leaders and all your plans that you're going to do. So the first week in a mission transfer was full on. Every weekend, you're speaking somewhere throughout the mission. You might have a state conference on weekend, or you might be, if we went to a sacrament meeting somewhere, inevitably we would be assigned to speak. So again, you're having to come up with thoughts and ideas. And for me, that you might think that's, he can speak quite a lot, that Daryl Watson. But then I had to do it in Dutch.
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
So I'd prepare thoughts in advance, because although my Dutch was pretty good, actually being able to speak sort of extemporaneously is okay in English, but to do it in Dutch, it takes a little bit more practice and skill. So I'd often prepare thoughts in advance. And then your whole transfer was filled with interviews. We would interview every missionary, which was about 110 missionaries every transfer over the 6 weeks. Interviews alone took 10 days every transfer, traveling around the mission.
Gosh.
And so that was 10 days of traveling, staying overnights in hotels. And then you also had every P day was on a Tuesday for the mission. So on a Tuesday, my inbox would be filled with letters to president. And so you'd have letters to president to plough through every week. And and then you'd respond to those missionaries who were really in need. And then you had interviews with stake presidents, every transfer, meeting with them face to face. So lots of things going on in the background. And then you have mission presidency meetings every week. We had a mission presidency call. I go into the office, deal with the office staff, problems that are arising, mental health issues, missionaries who maybe go home for some reason. It's a 24/7, 365 joyful experience. I made it sound very hard there, but it is frankly a really incredible labour of love. And at the same time, my wife was running a lot of things. She was running the emotional resilience program every week for all the missionaries to deal with that. She ran that. She also had interviews with missionaries. She kept the mission history. She set up a kringloop in the mission office, which was basically a second-hand place where missionaries could exchange their clothes and other things. And she got a little bit more teaching than me, because she was a natural Dutch speaker, and I don't know how she managed that, but she did get a bit more teaching than I was a little bit envious of that. But yeah, that's typically what goes on. So these mission leaders, and we were a small mission, so you can imagine a bigger mission, someone like London Mission, England London Mission, who have around 200 missionaries. I mean, how
Oh
do you cope
gosh,
with that every transfer?
blimey. I didn't realize it was so well. I thought it was full on, but you watch the best 2 years, for example, and you kind of see the mission president floating around just telling missionaries off every now and then. And actually, it's so much more. Yeah, it's like you're running an organization
Yeah,
that is constantly going. And well, talking about transfers, what was your process for um, sending missionaries to a specific place? How did you come to those decisions? And because they're quite important for a missionary. I know for me it was a lot of trust for me to place in
yeah,
the mission president to send me somewhere. Especially, I was quite I was in a mission that I wasn't very comfortable at first, and it was so different to my norm, and so I was really like, oh, I hope I don't get sent somewhere that's kind of too challenging for me, or so. Like, you place a lot of trust on that, you know. So it'd be interesting to hear that process.
Well, the process starts within the interviews every transfer. We would, both my wife and I would have one-on-one personal interviews with each missionary every transfer. That helped you get a feel for where the missionary was at, how they were doing, how they were coping, how they were getting on with their companion. So information precedes inspiration and revelation. And so we kept close contact with all of our missionaries. And at the same time, the assistants would work with lots of missionaries every transfer, and your members of your MLC, your STLs, solicitor trainer leaders, and your zone leaders, ZLs, they would be very helpful in the whole process. So it was a bit of a combination of information that I was receiving throughout the transfer with the assistants and my wife that would bring us about, it was usually about 10 days before the end of the transfer. We would sit down together, and it usually took about, the process, it depended on the size of the new group that was arriving. If we were getting a small group of one or two, that was fairly easy to accommodate. But if you were getting 10 or 12 missionaries coming in or more, there were a number of things you had to take into consider. If you took a group of 12 arriving, that meant you needed 12 trainers. So you had to monitor very carefully who in the mission was doing well, who was ready to train. And we would discuss, firstly, we'd identify trainers for up and coming new missionaries who would do well. We'd look at the profiles of a very limited piece of information about the incoming missionaries from their missionary application. That would be helpful. But frankly, what was more helpful was their Facebook page.
Oh,
You'd go and have a look at their Facebook page and you see the kind of things that they'd be sharing and posting, and if they've done any reels or anything like that, or on Instagram. And that gives you a bit more insight into their personality and who they really are. So the
right.
APs and I would always check out the social media links of that incoming missionary to see what they were really like, which
Oh,
was very helpful.
interesting.
Yeah, because that's about all you have. You have nothing else apart from a
Yeah.
picture, and we would sit and we would go through. Um, it was easy to identify companions who were doing really well. Well, the process would usually be fasting. We would start with a prayer, and then we'd talk through every companionship in the mission, every time.
Wow.
How is the process? How are they getting on? Are they doing well? Are they struggling? How's the area? That conversation took place for every companionship. And then we would identify who could be trainers, who could move into leadership, who would come out of leadership. Um, and eventually, and it's all electronic now. So there's nothing on picture boards or anything like that. It's all electronic. You have a system where it allows you to move pictures in and out, and you can actually see the impact it would have. And then you would build up your transfer board. I can remember one really interesting experience. I had lots of experiences with the transfer board, just feeling absolute at peace with it. But there was one particular transfer. It was way on to the end. It was about transfer 24 or 25. So I'd been doing this process for a long time, and we got to the end of the process, and we were one missionary down. We couldn't figure out what to do, and we hummed and hawed. We took a break. We took a walk. We came back, and we still couldn't figure this out. And we went through every combination of potential missionaries with this missionary who was on. It was a sister missionary who was on her own. We thought, well, what are we going to do here? And we looked at all the different combinations. Nothing. And so it was getting late. It was 9:30, 10 o'clock, and in the evening, and we needed to make the decision that night because the next day we were actually having to share this transfers. Um, anyway, the assistants went home. My wife went to bed. I stayed up a little longer. I thought, what am I going to do? So we had covered off every eventuality, and we nothing. Not so. I thought, right, well, we've got these two sisters going home. I might have to ask one of them to stay. And the flight plans were done. Everything was in play. I thought, I'm going to ask them. So I called them up, both up, 10 o'clock at night, one by one. I said, Sister, I'm not saying them, Sister so and so, what are you doing when you go home? What are you actually doing? And she said, well, I'm doing this present, I'm doing that. I says, okay. Why are you calling me at this late? And why are you asking that? I says, well, I says, I may have to ask you to stay. Present, I'll do anything you want me to do. But she'd already extended a transfer already, so I'd have to pull some strings and make it all happen. Then I called the other sister. In a like manner, she said, well, I'm going on this, I'm going on a cruise, I'm doing that, or whatever. And I says, well, I may have to ask you to stay. I'll do anything you want me to do, President, whatever. It was quite an emotional thing. Anyway, I says, well, I don't know. I says, I'm going to my bed, I'm going to sleep on it, and um, and I'll let you know in the morning. Well, went to bed, Ben, and as usual with me, I usually got kind of inspiration very early in the quiet of the night. So it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when I had this name, and I thought, well, I'd been through that already, and again it came second time. This sister's name came in, and it meant several changes, but it turned out to be the most inspirational piece of revelation that I think I had in my entire time. And I just had to go that extra effort, that extra bit of work to figure out a complicated process to get this particular sister where she needed to be. And it impacted a few, but the impact was such a peaceful, reassuring revelation, really, that, and then that was quite a big one, but again, the Lord's hand was manifest to us as a mission. And every transfer, all 27 of them that we went through, I can testify that they weren't things that Daryl Watson and Monique Watson did. Those were inspired transfers that the Lord Jesus Christ helped us to initiate so that these young people would be with the people they needed to be with and in the areas they needed to be in so that they could have the experiences that they needed to have. That's my witness of it. There you go.
Thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that sacred experience. I think there's volumes of lessons that you can learn from that transfer, especially the seeing how I wonder if those processes could have been so peaceful had you not labored diligently to collect information from the missionaries. It seems so integral, and I think there's a lot to take away from that for someone in not in that role, just in daily life, and well, following on from that quite nicely, because I suspect that part of the answer to the next question that I've been excited to ask will be what you've just shared partly. But the question is, what is good slash what is successful for a mission president? Because we have metrics and spiritual kind of lots of talks that we can go to what is the success of a missionary,
Yeah.
conversion of self, conversion of others. But what are you kind of judged on as a mission leader?
So there are a whole bunch of key performance indicators, KPIs that you are measured on as a mission. The
Right.
obvious ones are things like convert baptisms, retention, um, number of people that are being taught, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's a huge part of being a mission leader. One of the very interesting things, though, that we learned through our training and before we went on a mission was that, frankly, um, the more important work in our eyes was actually working with all 332 of the missionaries that we had. So we, one by one, uh, had a huge commitment to them individually. They're like our own children in some respects now. Some of them even call me dad, or my wife mum, and mission dad, mission mum, because we grew so close to those personal relationships. So I think first and foremost to the missionaries themselves, those elders and sisters that we were privileged to serve with, we wanted to be saving the shepherds, because that's who they were. They are the shepherds in the mission, and as they come home and go into their own lives and then become leaders themselves wherever they are in the world, we were, and as they really focused their lives on becoming a lifelong disciple of Jesus Christ, we had a strong bond and a strong connection to every one of them. And so we were about working with them to love them and to help them set the kind of high expectations and high love and high trust, those kind of things, so that they could perform at their very best. Um, so first and foremost, our mission was to work with all of the missionaries, one by one, to love them and help them become that disciple of Jesus Christ. And then as you focus with them and build that trust and give them the opportunity to fail and to succeed, then the natural consequence of that was that they would go and perform really well. So we would have a high performing mission in terms of convert baptisms and working with members and doing their missionary work. So we gave them a long lead and a lot of trust, to go and succeed or to fail. Um, and we didn't have any extra rules or any extra standards. There was more than enough in their standards book of discipleship with Christ. But first and foremost, Ben, it was to the missionaries. And then our belief was the baptisms would come. And they did all the time. And maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. Others may argue, that it's you should be looking after baptisms and converts first and then the missionaries, but ours was quite the converse. Our focus was on the missionary and helping them develop their personal witness and testimony of Jesus Christ. As you know, in Singapore, it would be tough. It's tough in Belgium and the Netherlands. You've got another language to learn. You've got a nation and countries that are secular in nature. God and Christ and religion are way down in terms of the priorities there. So it was a tough place to be. So we focused on the missionaries first of all.
It was interesting. I did thanks to your help, I was able to do that general conference roundtable with local members in the
Yeah.
Netherlands, which was a fascinating insight into the church there. And as you say, the kind of secular nature of the country, perhaps partly down to its rich history of Protestantism and the kind of puritanical religions that had been prevalent in that part of Europe for quite a long time. It was really interesting to see how that connects you to the present day, and yet at the same time, things are happening, and those members that I spoke to in the Netherlands specifically, they were incredible people, and you could tell that their testimonies were authentic.
Mm.
I think that's the thing that stood out the most to me, because the Dutch, the stereotype is that they're very honest people, sometimes scarily honest.
Very
So
honest.
that was really interesting.
Yeah, very
Um,
honest and very direct. I've been married to a Dutch lady for a
yeah,
long time.
Uh, so I was very fortunate to have a really good relationship with all three. I had three mission
Oh,
presidents during my
wow.
year, which is kind of unusual. And I love each one of them. They're the mission leader couples. Each couple, I just love them and stay in touch with them today. However, some people close to me uh, didn't have as good as a relationship with their mission president and mission leaders as they would have liked. And I just wonder your it's such a big part of your mission, and it's a part of it that you take away. And I just wonder your advice to missionaries
Mhm.
on how they can have a good relationship with their mission leaders and have that enriching part of their life.
That's a great question. I think that every missionary is called to the mission and the mission leaders that they need to have. I think that's something that we're probably fairly familiar with, actually, that missionaries are called to who they need to, where they need to be, and the mission leaders are called to help them grow and develop. Um, so, for anybody going on a mission, then how do you develop that relationship? Well, it's probably wise to be honest, open, to write your mission president every week, certainly, to make sure that he's aware of your situation, to be very transparent as well, about anything that may have been you may have been struggling with or finding difficult before you came out on a mission. Um, I see now in our mission we would, and this is the same in all 450 across the world now, with the Gen Z rising generation coming through, that there's massive challenges with these things,
Mm.
massive challenges, and so your mission leaders can help every missionary face up to those challenges. Every mission has a mission mental health advisor assigned to that mission. So missionaries would often share with me some challenges they were having, and as a professional coach and counsellor myself, I was able to deal with some of that. But my time was so precious as the mission started to go back up to its complement of missionaries. I could no longer deal with some of the issues that we're facing, so we'd have to call upon the mental health advisors. How do you build that relationship? Yeah, one interview at a time. Um, I think those missionaries who I have the strongest relationship were very open from the very start and were really able to connect with them. So just to be themselves and to share the thoughts and feelings of their heart when they have those opportunities to meet with their mission leaders. Um, those were, I think, if I look back on my entire mission, uh, my wife and I, between the two of us, had over 6,000 one-on-one interviews,
Wow,
and
that's
so
incredible.
those are coaching, interviews. The shortest we'd ever do would be 15 minutes. So that's not possible in every mission when you've got lots more missionaries. But 15 to 30 minutes, sometimes it'd go on for an hour, depending on things that needed to be dealt with. So it's in those moments that I look back with great fondness, great love, and probably some of the most spiritually rewarding experiences for us both serving together as we knelt in prayer side by side and shoulder to shoulder, really, knee to knee, as we talked and shared and supported one another going through those mission. So those interviews are critical to the forming a bond that will enable any missionary to succeed in the mission. So be you, be open, be willing to share the troubles, the challenges, and and hopefully your mission leaders will have the time. That's the essence. And if they don't have the time, don't be frightened and shy just to say, President, actually, I need another 20 minutes of your time this transfer. I need to talk to you about something. And they'll make that available to you. Can you answer the question?
Yeah, it's a I. That's the interesting thing about it, is that I had no idea what you could say to that. You know, it could have
Yeah.
been anything, and that's a really interesting point of view on it. And you know, I think, to be honest, I was partly helped in my relationship with my mission presidents because I was British, and it was a bit of novelty.
In
So
Singapore, I'm
the
the Brit,
yeah,
Singapore.
the Mr.
Yeah,
Bean of the mission, but
yeah,
no, but also that, you know, I look back on those interviews as well as, man, just so powerful. I mean, having a good relationship with your mission president and being connected to them in that way is just, for me, it was life changing. It was
yeah,
transformative, honestly, and that's what my sister and my brother-in-law are both serving missions now, and that's something that I made sure to say to them, was that really learn from your mission president. They're there for a reason. Even if, yeah, you know, you're not talking about being buddies. You know what I mean? You're not talking about being pals here. You're saying there's someone who God has kind of connected you with for a specific purpose, and I've learned so much from the example of my mission presidents, and
mm,
yeah,
mm,
just a really sweet part of my life to have them in, and
yeah.
being involved with my family now. You know,
I think too, Ben. It's important to say that you, my wife, had an equally valuable role to play in all of those interviews because she would meet with them and she would identify things about the missionaries that I never saw, and like conversely, she never saw. So after every interview session during the day, we would be travelling home or we'd be staying in a hotel. So we would talk about the missionaries. How's he doing? How's she doing? How can we help them? How could they improve? So you were constantly aware of how can you help this missionary be better, and that was your focus really to help them. And so we engaged lots of different things. When we lost our first missionary who went home, because at the start we were committed to saying, "Oh, we want to keep everybody. We're not going to lose anybody." It's really, we had a real desire to make sure that everyone stayed. And when the first one, there are several reasons why missionaries have to return home. Okay, but when the first one arose, and it was a difficult situation, but we met together, and then I realised, and I was quite emotional actually, that there was actually nothing I could do for this particular missionary. They had to return home. They knew it. I knew it, and they couldn't serve in the field. And once I crossed that hurdle of losing the first one, although we tried to do everything to keep all of them, there were some circumstances that it was better for a missionary to return home. And now, subsequently, when missionaries have to go home for different reasons, they can actually transfer into a service mission. So it's usually their mission back home where they simply transfer. So they just transfer from a proselyting mission and serving away from home. They transfer home to a service mission where they serve at home. And that's been a beautiful thing that we've seen grow. And we had the chance to be a pilot mission we were one of 10 missions selected from around the world to pilot the service mission, and we saw that grow. And now service missions are just a really valuable part of missions, and they're seamlessly together, working side by side, sharing and doing. And it's a great thing to see that happening now.
yeah, I think service missions are just they're a beautiful thing, and I'm so glad that they've grown and grown and grown, and we see service missionaries in many of the wards that we attend now,
Yeah.
um, and I just love them. It's so nice to see someone you know as well have that mantle. It really is. It really is different. You know, you'd assume wrongly that, you know, oh, they'll stay and it'll just kind of be, they'll still come to church and they'll do their thing. But no, there is a real power and authority that that comes when you have a service missionary there. So I've really enjoyed that. And actually, linked with that, senior couples. I mean, what's it like to serve with senior couples and uh, have them in under your stewardship?
Vital. Senior couples are an absolute vital part of any mission globally. And anybody that's considering serving as a senior couple missionary in a mission, there is a critical need now for senior couples to go. I mean, there are far more places available than senior couples applying at the moment. So every mission globally has a desperate need for more couples, and it's different in different parts of the world. So the mission, frankly, would not run without senior couples. We had in our office, we had three couples. One was looking after finance and the transport, so cars and vehicles, and then in Belgium and the Netherlands it was bikes because every missionary had a bike because it was a flat. But we had a wonderful time with them, and it's almost like a full time job. They're in the office, 5 days a week. And the vehicle coordinator, was also called to serve as a branch president at the same time in one of the branches. So he was a full-time ecclesiastical leader and also full-time in the office. With another couple who dealt with all the housing requirements. They travelled throughout the mission looking after, I think it was about 50 apartments, 51 or 52 now apartments in our mission. So constant maintenance, constant issues, constant things to deal with, things breaking down, and on and on and on. And then with another couple who dealt with the um, visas, registrations in country, travel arrangements, office requirements, ordering equipment, publications, keeping, Preach My Gospel in store, having Books of Mormon available, all of that. So those are just three couples. We had 11 couples in our mission, some in the field, some in working with young adults, some in public affairs and communications and government and interfaith, others in the National Archives doing digital recording, and some serving in wards and branches in leadership roles. So there's lots to do, and now certainly in Europe North and Europe Central, there has been recently a new piece of direction that if you're a senior couple and maybe finance was something that you were struggling with in the past, then there is now available for the first time some financial help that will supplement what you can afford to pay to go on your mission, but the area will be able to supplement your financial requirements, so you can go and serve without any sort of problem that would stop you from serving. So that's now. Just speak to your bishop, your stake president. You can approach them, and if you're struggling financially but you have a real desire to go, then you can still go. And that's a great move forward. It's a leap forward for the church in Europe, actually, that will now allow us to enable anybody who wants to serve to go and serve. So seniors are absolutely vital to the success of any mission. Our focus as mission leaders was on the young missionaries and taking time with them, and the seniors are much more around operational things or ecclesiastical support in local areas and branches and wards who need your help. So if you're thinking about it, go and do it. I think it was Elder Rasband who spoke just last year about seniors and how vital they are.
We have a listener who comments and engages with the show quite a lot, and I know he's very new to his senior mission in Ghana. So
All
if he's
right.
listening, hello, we see you, and we're grateful for your service. um, how did COVID? Because you came in 2021, was it? Is that right?
Yeah.
How did COVID change the way we view and conduct missionary work going on as well? Like not just during COVID, but its impact on missionary work following it?
So COVID had a huge impact on missionaries' locations. Many from around the world just went home, and it created, or they filled up missions in mostly in the States. So if you're a complement of 150, 160, some missions were up to 250, 300, and it was just a kind of crazy time for a lot of missionaries around the world as missionaries returned to the States. In Europe, they took the decision to keep the missionaries in most missions throughout Europe. So when we arrived, what we understood was through COVID, you couldn't do traditional missionary work and go and talk with people on the street, or you couldn't go street contacting. There was a massive explosion of online missionary work, and social media came to the fore as never before. So a lot of missionaries globally were creating content, storytelling, and very much involved in online finding. Our mission was very fortunate in that some years previously, an apostle had visited our mission and it had given us a little bit extra funding, which was repeated year on year. So it allowed us to do, in the Belgium Netherlands mission, our own Facebook ad campaigns, social media ad campaigns. Now, that now is a staple of every mission globally. So the church missionary department now runs in not every mission, because in some missions around the world it's slightly different. In Africa and South America, there's no real need to be running lots of ad campaigns, because people will come quite freely now and join the church. But in areas where it's a little bit more difficult to find people, through COVID times, there was an expansion and quite an explosion of ways to share the gospel online. And missionaries, as being missionaries, some of them created, I think there was, Elder President Oakes gave a talk years ago, good, better, best. Okay. I would say there was probably some poor, slightly, slightly better, then good, then better than best when it comes to content in terms of what missionaries created. And so they had a go at finding and sharing content online with mixed successes all around the globe. But that's subsequently been fine tuned. And most missions now will have social media leaders, whereby they'll work with maybe a few of their missionaries creating content. Some missionaries are fortunate to have nice cameras and nice equipment. We were lucky; we had a drone and nice cameras and
Oh wow!
nice laptops that we invested in for our social media and content team. So we were able to create really higher quality, better videos that we could share in Facebook ad campaigns. And so social media, Facebook, Instagram now in some missions, and the ad campaigns that are run constantly now are generating lots of new opportunities for missionaries, and it's successful across the globe. Some areas it's better than in others. In our mission, we were seeing it was between 40, but usually around 40% of the new members coming in were coming in through social media, finding and opportunities that way. So it was quite high. In other missions, it's a little lower. They have more success in other ways of finding, but in ours, primarily it was through our members. It was about 50%, 40% through social media, and then 10% through other ways. So service or self-referrals or street contacting or something like that. So, and it varies all over the world. We're all different, and some have, great ways of finding online. Others are a little bit slower, and it comes really down to the capabilities of the missionaries, the mission leaders, and what their focus was. And I'm a bit of if anybody follows me online, I'm a bit of a blogger. I blog all the time and I share lots of thoughts and ideas because my experience has been that has been the way that we've seen success. So, yeah, from COVID, there was an expansion of social media online tools. And now I think it's been fine tuned into a way that is pretty effective globally. And missionaries in the field currently, if there's any missionaries listening to this in field, they will know that they have processes to follow. They get referrals into their PMG app, Preach My Gospel app, and they can from there just really quickly respond to any incoming referrals. And every missionary that's serving now in some of the areas that are struggling with finding, they will have ads to deal with every day. Some are fortunate to have many ads every day to respond to. There you go.
So interesting. Yeah. Uh, on another angle of the COVID thing, there's an experience in my mission in over in Singapore that I just found totally miraculous. In that our mission president was there, and he felt this this real urge and urgency to prepare prospective missionaries locally.
Yeah.
Um, and so we had this big drive of really supporting members who could serve missions in the next few years from Malaysia. And traditionally, I would say that a lot of the missionaries from Malaysia and countries in Asia will often get called to England or America or other countries to serve. However, really we had this season where mostly all the local members who were going on missions and preparing for missions were being assigned to Malaysia to their own mission. And I can imagine that some were probably excited, and some might have thought, "Oh, it would have been nice to go off to California or something like that." But it was really exciting to have more local missionaries in. And then about a year after that, we learned that we would have the first local mission president that the mission had had,
Mhm.
um, Singaporean gentleman who
Wow.
President Wu. And so we had that. And so we had our first local mission president, and we had this incredible influx of local missionaries. And then, of course, unbeknownst to anyone but God, really, COVID hit. And to me, it's just, on the one hand, it was beautiful, but on the other hand, it was just so miraculous that that mission could continue, because Malaysia had one of the harshest lockdowns during COVID that there was.
Mhm.
And yet that vast sort of separated apart mission, you have Borneo all the way over here, Singapore down here, West Malaysia, Peninsular Malaysia near Thailand. That mission was able to continue and function because of those preparations that had been laid years before with no idea that COVID was coming. Yet we had
Yeah.
this huge swathe of prepared local missionaries who carried the mission on, and a local mission president as well. And um, I don't know, it really was a faith strengthening experience for me to see that develop. And yeah, it's just another testament, as
Mhm.
many as the incredible, powerful, ongoing revelation that you receive on a mission and in that kind of mission area of the church.
Mhm. Yeah. We had, it was definitely for us, well, with Monique, my wife being Dutch, that was a real great benefit for us. It really helped to forge closer links with members in the Netherlands and in Belgium. And Monique was a convert to the church in Utrecht in 1990. So that really was a real positive thing that we were able to connect. And so that, just as you were sharing, Ben, that local um, connection is a really powerful thing to help build trust. And that's what we saw. I don't want to take away from the new mission leaders who are South African and they have a connection too with the language. They called it baby Dutch and Afrikaans, so they could understand most things, but they had to upskill their own Dutch. But there's definitely a benefit from having local people. So 2 Europeans was a big thing for the Dutch Belgian mission.
Hmm. And as we kind of close up this interview, which has been fascinating, and I appreciate your kind of openness in sharing your insights about your experience as mission leaders. I would just kind of ask you in closing to kind of share with us your biggest takeaway from being a mission leader and any advice that you would have to prospective missionaries. And I know some active missionaries listen to this on Facebook as well. What kind of message you would leave regarding the state of missionary work and what you learned and how you reflect on it?
Well, the exciting thing to mention, I think, is that we are in a golden age of missionary work. President Nelson, bless him in his old age, has spoken fervently about the gathering of Israel, and his phrase will be both sides of the veil. And that is evidenced in, missionaries all around the globe. There is most definitely a hastening of the work, once again, of salvation. We've seen it all across Europe. Post-COVID, there is a massive movement of people, not only around Europe, but around the globe. And this mass movement of people through immigration, wars, and all the different famines and challenges that there are, and all the different issues that are created all over the world. We see it in Britain, we see it in America, with people trying to get into countries. But there's a massive movement of people. And as we are now in the kind of winding up scene, in the last of the last days, and we're seeing temples being announced, constantly in General Conference, there is a vast need for good, well qualified missionaries to go and serve in the mission field. Your missions will be the biggest growing opportunity that you'll ever have in your life. They are hard, but they are absolutely incredible to go and serve. You'll be blessed with 2 mission leaders who will love you in every way, shape, and means possible. They will walk, as the proclaimers will talk about, 500 miles to see you and fall down at your door because they love you that much, and they will help you not only in the mission but forevermore. I constantly have, I would reckon, probably between my wife and I, at least 2 to 3 calls or messages maybe 5 or 10 a day, calls at least 1 or 2 every day now that we're home with missionaries. So you're going to grow and you're going to come closer to Christ, and you're going to become a disciple or choose to be a lifelong disciple of Christ as you apply those things in your life. I've changed. I've grown up in the gospel. I've been a member of the church all my life, but my knowledge, my appreciation of who I am, my reassurance that God does provide revelation, even to me, this wee lad that's a wee bit older now from Dunfermline in Scotland. He will talk to you. He talks to me through inspiration and revelation. But I know that I've felt it. But most of all, it's not about me. It was never about me or my wife or about you. If you're thinking about a mission, it's all about the Lord Jesus Christ and our Heavenly Father's plan, that plan of salvation. You'll come to love Preach My Gospel as never before. It was written for members, and missionaries just benefit from it, actually. First and foremost, when you read President Nelson's first presidency announcement about the launching of Preach My Gospel, it was written for members first. And if we as members can actually just apply those things in our life, it'll change us. I know it changed my wife and I. we are not the same people now as we were 3.5 years ago. And actually trying to live up to that kind of higher law that we had in the mission is proven a little challenging when you come home, because you've been up here and now you're down here. And I've been through that twice, when I was a young missionary in London, 1983 to 85, and now again. But with the Lord's help and with his guidance, we know we'll get through it. I could talk forever, but the gospel is a beautiful gift. Go and serve, go and do, and feel the love of the Lord in your life. It will change your life. I know it has ours, and it will do yours too. That's my thoughts, Ben, to close off.
Thank you, Daryl. I appreciate your time, and yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching For All the Saints. This show needs your help to grow. Please like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you think would enjoy it. Thank you.